All right, so get this. You could apparently write a letter to, like, get negative marks removed from your credit report.
Yeah, it's a pretty interesting area. It's called a Goodwill letter, and it's where the human element of finance kind of comes in. And today we're going to break down how they work and more importantly, like when they even make sense to use.
See, that's what kind of throws me off. I always thought credit reports were like these totally set in stone things, right? Like once it's there, it's there. Is this really a get out of jail free card for bad credit?
No, definitely not a free pass. It's more like a strategic move, and it only makes sense in certain situations. And it's different from disputing errors, which we could get into later. A goodwill letter is all about appealing to a creditor's, well, goodwill.
Okay, so it's less about saying I'm right and you're wrong and more about like, hey, can you cut me some slack just this once?
Exactly. Think of it like you accidentally dinged your friend's car, right? You're not denying it happened, but you're kind of hoping your good track record with them might, soften the blow.
Okay, yeah, I see how that analogy works. But let's be honest, wouldn't most creditors just laugh off a letter like that? Like, what's the psychology behind why this might actually work?
Well, the interesting thing here is that creditors, even these big institutions, are ultimately run by people, right? And people are susceptible to, let's call it, persuasive storytelling.
Hold on, are we saying there's an art to writing these letters? It's not just like begging for mercy.
Oh, there's definitely a strategy involved. You're essentially trying to reframe the narrative, of your credit history. Instead of just having one late payment that's screaming unreliable, you want to try to paint a bigger picture.
So you're adding context. It's like, yeah, I messed up, but here's why. More importantly, here's why I'm still a good bet.
Precisely. And that's where understanding the creditor's psychology comes in. They're not just these heartless robots. Their goal is to, lend money to people who are going to pay it back.
So if you can convince them that this was a one-time thing, a fluke, and that you're usually on top of your finances, they're less likely to view you as a risk.
Exactly. But it's not about spinning some sob story. It has to be authentic. If you make up a bunch of excuses, it's going to backfire big time.
That makes sense. But even if you are being totally genuine, wouldn't sending out these letters all the time make you look, I don't know, kind of desperate?
You've hit a really crucial point there. Goodwill letters are a break glass in case of emergency tool.
Yeah.
If you overuse them, it sends the wrong signal for sure.
So strategically, when does it make the most sense to kind of pull this lever? What situations scream goodwill letter time?
The sweet spot is usually for isolated incidents, right, that have a clear, understandable cause. Think, a single late payment because you suddenly lost your job or there was a medical emergency, something outside of your normal control.
But wouldn't that just be like shifting the blame?
No, it's not about blame. It's about giving them context. Remember, you're owning up to the mistake, taking responsibility, but then adding that extra info that helps the creditor see the whole picture.
Okay, so you're saying that by adding in that extra layer of information, you're basically helping the creditor make a more informed decision about you as a borrower.
Exactly. It's about humanizing something that can feel very impersonal. And the type of lender matters too. Smaller credit unions or local banks, are often much more receptive to these appeals than giant national institutions.
Right, makes sense. They might have more leeway to consider those individual cases.
Yeah.
So how do we know if this approach is even right for us? What kind of track record do you need to have to even consider a goodwill letter?
That's a great question. The stronger your overall credit history, the better your chances of a goodwill letter working. If you've got a history of late payments, this isn't going to magically erase that,
So it's more of a fine-tuning tool for people who are generally pretty responsible, but just, have that one unfortunate slip-up.
Exactly. It's about showing that you're not the kind of person who typically misses payments, that this was an unusual thing for you.
Okay, so we've established that goodwill letters aren't for everyone, and timing is crucial. So let's actually dive into the letter itself. What makes a goodwill letter stand out from a simple please, please, please email?
All right, so let's get into the anatomy of an effective goodwill letter. So when it comes to actually writing the letter, it's all about striking the right tone. Think of it as a balance between, being professional, but also genuinely sincere.
Gotcha. So no guilt trips or over-the-top sob stories.
Right, exactly. Laying it on too thick can actually make you seem less sincere and hurt your chances. You want to keep it respectful and straightforward.
Okay, I'm with you. So how do we strike that balance? What are the key things that need to be in every goodwill letter?
Well, think about it like telling a really concise, compelling story. Start by, setting the stage, clearly identify yourself, the account you're referring to, all that.
So no need to like give them my entire credit history up to this point.
Nope, just focus on the issue at hand. And then, clearly state your purpose. You're not beating around the bush. You're directly asking them to remove that negative mark.
All right, straight to the point.
Yeah.
Then comes the juicy part, explaining yourself.
Exactly. This is where you provide context for the late payment or whatever caused the negative mark, right? You're not making excuses. You're just, shedding light on the circumstances.
So like, if it was a medical emergency, I'd briefly explain what happened, maybe even mention the unexpected bills and all that.
Exactly. You're painting a picture to help them see why this wasn't typical behavior for you.
And I guess this is also where I'd mention steps I've taken to make sure it doesn't happen again, like setting up payment reminders or maybe consolidating my bills, that kind of thing.
You got it. It shows that you've actually learned from it and you're serious about managing your finances responsibly.
So it's not enough to just say, I'm sorry. You got to show them you're taking action.
Right. Show sincerity and builds trust. After you've explained everything, that's when you, pivot to highlighting your strengths. Remind them of your positive credit history, on-time payments, responsible credit card use, all that good stuff.
So I'm basically saying, look, this one thing was a bump in the road, but overall, I'm a reliable borrower.
Exactly. It helps reduce their risk. You're not just a problem to be solved. You're a valuable customer who had a temporary setback.
Makes sense. Okay, so we've set the scene, pointed out our good track record. What's next?
Now you just reiterate your request, politely ask them to consider removing the negative mark as a gesture of goodwill. Just keep it brief and respectful.
Something like, given my circumstances and my commitment to, responsible financial management, I would be grateful if you'd consider removing this late payment from my credit report. Something like that.
Yeah, that's a great example. And finally, always end by, thanking them for their time and consideration. A little appreciation can go a long way.
Got it. So the structure is pretty straightforward, but what about the tone and the language? Should it be like super formal, like a business letter, or more, conversational?
Professionalism is key. Avoid slang or anything overly casual. You want to sound sincere and respectful, but not like you're, pleading with a friend or something.
Right. Okay. So clear, concise, and professional. Now, once the letter is written, how do we actually send it? Fax, carrier pigeon? What's the protocol these days?
Well, actually, in this day and age, it's recommended to send it both by email and good old-fashioned mail.
Wait, really? Why both?
Well, you're kind of covering all your bases, right? Some creditors might be more responsive to email, while others prefer traditional mail.
So, like, you're increasing your chances of someone actually seeing the letter.
Exactly. And this is where it gets interesting. Think about how differently a physical letter is perceived versus an email.
Never thought about it like that.
A handwritten or even a nicely printed letter can really stand out in a pile of mail. It shows effort and sincerity that an email might lack.
That's a really good point. It's like the difference between a thank you text and a handwritten note, right? It feels more personal.
Precisely. That extra effort just subtly shows them how serious you are about this request. But before you hit send, make sure you do one very important thing. Proofread, proofread, proofread.
Oh, of course, yeah. Typos and grammar errors would make me look totally careless.
Absolutely. You're trying to show them you're responsible and detail-oriented, right? A polished letter reinforces that.
Okay, got it. So the letter's written, it's polished, it's sent off. Now we just wait.
Well, not necessarily. It's totally okay to send a polite follow-up. Maybe an email or a letter if you haven't heard anything back after a few weeks.
Okay, so be proactive, but not like a pest.
Exactly. Persistence without being annoying is a good way to put it. But remember, even if you write the best Goodwill letter ever, there's no guarantee it will work.
Right, and that's been something we've been talking about throughout this whole deep dive. So what if it doesn't work? What are some other options our listeners can explore?
Well, that's where we shift gears and talk about some other credit repair strategies. Goodwill letters are just one tool in the toolbox.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about these Goodwill letters, like when it's worth trying them out, how to write one that actually gets results, even like the whole psychology of, why a creditor might actually say yes. But what's the plan B, if it just doesn't work?
Yeah, that's when the real work starts. Goodwill letters are kind of like a shortcut, right? But even if they do work, they're not a replacement for actually building good financial habits.
Right. It's not a magic get-out-of-jail-free card for your credit. So for people who might need more than just a little nudge in the right direction, what are those, tried and true methods for actually improving credit?
Well, it all comes down to showing that you're financially responsible, consistently over time. And step one is taking care of any inaccuracies.
You're talking about like disputing errors on your credit report, right? We mentioned that earlier, how it's different from a Goodwill letter.
Exactly. If something's just plain wrong in your report, you got to dispute it directly with the credit bureau. You're correcting facts, not asking for favors.
Makes sense. But what about when those negative marks are accurate, but you just, want to improve your score overall? What are some moves you can make to kind of bump it up?
One strategy that can be really effective is becoming an authorized user on someone else's credit card, one that has a good payment history.
Wait, so someone else's good credit can help me. How does that even work?
So if you have like a family member or a close friend with a credit card that they've used responsibly, they can add you as an authorized user. Then their account history shows up on your report, and that can give your score a little boost.
Huh, interesting. Kind of like borrowing some of their good credit karma. What if you don't have anyone who can do that for you? Are there any other ways to go about it?
Absolutely. You could look into getting a secured credit card. They require a security deposit, which basically becomes your credit limit.
So it's kind of like a training wheels approach to building credit, right?
Yeah, exactly. Right. It's a way for creditors to lend with less risk on their end. And if you use it responsibly, make your payments on time, you're showing that you can handle credit.
Like proving yourself to the credit world, I guess.
Right.
But let's be real. These strategies, they take time, right?
Oh, right.
You can't just fix a bad credit score overnight.
Yeah, that's the truth. Building good credit is a marathon, not a sprint, Takes patience, discipline, and that commitment to building those good financial habits we talked about.
Right, like paying bills on time, keeping your credit card balances low, not racking up unnecessary debt, that kind of thing.
Exactly. Those actions speak way louder than any letter ever could. They're the foundation for a solid financial life.
So for our listeners who might be feeling a bit overwhelmed with all this credit stuff, what's the big takeaway?
I'd say it's this. You have more control over your credit than you might think. Goodwill letters are a tool, sure, but the real power comes from those everyday financial choices you make, consistently.
It is kind of empowering to realize you can actually shape your financial future.
For sure. And remember, it's never too late to start building good habits. Even if you've made mistakes in the past, you can turn things around. It just takes effort and making smart decisions.
This whole deep dive has really made me look at credit differently. It's not just numbers. It's the story those numbers tell and the choices we make to, write that story.
Couldn't put it better myself. It's about taking control of your financial well-being and knowing that you have the power to shape your own credit story.
And on that note, we're going to wrap up this deep dive into the world of Goodwill letters and credit repair. We've explored a lot from, that psychology of persuasion to the actual nuts and bolts of building solid financial habits.
Yeah, and hopefully our listeners feel like they've got the knowledge and the tools to take charge of their credit, make good choices, and, build a brighter financial future.
Thanks for joining us today. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and remember, your financial well-being is definitely worth the effort.
If this podcast helped you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. Your support helps us keep making these videos. Thanks for watching.